Hi, my name is Mandy Chang, and I'm on the Building Momentum Hosts Committee. We have an excellent conversation teed up for you today on finding product market fit. Leading the discussion today is Collin Wallace, a serial entrepreneur in the food and beverage space, and CEO and co-founder of ZeroStorefront. ZeroStorefront provides a text message marketing platform purpose-built for restaurants. Prior to ZeroStorefront, Collin was the head of innovation at Grubhub, where he is listed on the multiple patents. He has built 4 companies, 3 were acquired by companies including Eat Club, Combi, and Grubhub. Collin holds a bachelor's in science and engineering from Georgia Tech and an MBA from Stanford Graduate School of Business. He's a proud alum of the Harvard SVM program, Techstars, and Y Combinator. He's an avid investor and mentor to dozens of other startups. He lives in San Mateo with his amazing wife, Doris, puppies Aspen and Penny. Collin, I'll hand it off to you now. Thank you for leading the discussion today.
All right. Thanks so much, Mandy, for taking the time and helping put all this together. Super happy to be here. Very excited about the panel that we've got. Every one of the people in this panel has touched my life in one way or another through my startup journey as well. So hopefully they'll be able to share some of that knowledge and guidance with you as it relates to finding product market fit. So I wanted to just share a little bit of information to kind of steer the conversation on finding product market fit. It's sort of this elusive thing, like finding a mythical unicorn around how do you go about finding product market fit, and what are the ways that you can measure it. So I thought we put together just a quick teaser on frameworks for how you can think about finding product market fit, and then we can sort of dig in from there. So I'll just share this screen. Hopefully everyone can see this. Super quick presentation. I'm going to add the link for this into the chat, and that way you can just download it from DocSend. So finding product market fit, basically there's 2 ways to think about product market fit. One is qualitatively and the other is quantitatively. The qualitative one is the one you probably hear about a ton, right? And this is how much do customers love your product? How bad would they feel if they couldn't use your product anymore, right? These are ways to sort of qualitatively measure whether or not your product is solving a problem for the market or creating value for them. The second way to think about product market fit is quantitative, right? And so without getting too technical here, what you'll see in this graph is product market fit is when you can get your product within a range of customer satisfaction and customer expectation. So one of the things you'll find is that it's not a static value, right? That customer satisfaction is always increasing, that line is increasing, their expectations are always increasing. So even if you got PMF at one point, if you don't continue to iterate on the product, right, you may lose it in the future. And so one of the other things I'll point out here is the extent to which your product doesn't meet customer expectations, you'll see that manifest as churn. And to the extent that your product exceeds the customer expectations, you'll see that manifest as growth. And so this is a way for you to quantitatively look at it. The most common way for measuring product market fit is retention, right? So if customers are getting value from your product, then they stay. If they are not getting value, then they leave. And so this means getting your product out as quickly as possible so that you can measure it. The best way I've heard this said was actually by Michael Seibel. He said, product market fit is something that happens after you build something that people want or that customers want. And so that means you have to do a little bit of building in order to be able to test these values and to be able to test whether or not customers stick around or don't. And so anyways, there are a couple different ways to do that I included in this slide as well. I'm not going to dig into too much detail here, but again, I will add this link to the chat so that you can download the rest of this presentation. There's 2 or 3 more slides just on how to test product market fit. So with that, I would love to get our panelists to introduce themselves. Let me stop sharing first. We've got Holly Liu, we've got Guy Assad, as well as Song Laron. Each is amazingly impressive in their own rights and long, illustrious careers in a relatively short period of time. So I'd love to get you to introduce yourselves, and then we can talk about product market fit.
Hi, everybody. I'm Holly. Thank you so much for having me here. So I started a company in 2006 that started as a corporate social network, but we exited as a mobile gaming company in 2017, had a couple of pivots along the way, found product market fit once or twice. And then after we exited in 2017, I ended up working at Y Combinator as a visiting partner. And that's where I met many of these illustrious folks on the panel. So been able to see, to to build some product market fit, as well as through some tough times. We didn't go through the pandemic, but we definitely went through the 2008 recession, as well as been able to see across a ton of these companies at Y Combinator. So I'm happy to be here.
All right. Thanks so much, Holly. Guy, you want to take us off next?
Yeah, no, sure. I'm happy to do so. So, hi, I'm Guy. I am co-founder and CEO of Clerky. We're basically a financial automation platform that's purpose-built to just help everyday Americans get out of debt and ease their debt burden. In terms of when we started in our journey, the funny story is we actually got a earned perspective from working with some of the bigger banks trying to solve this problem internally. And one of the things that we kind of quickly realized is that they couldn't solve it on their own. And so we ended up quitting our day jobs to go and do this. And it's been a fairly short journey, but happy to report that we've reached 1.5 million users as of last quarter. And hopefully we're going to continue to keep growing.
That's awesome. That's amazing. Song, you cap us off?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Song Laran. Really excited to be here. CEO and co-founder of Squire. Squire is a business management point of sale platform focusing on barbershops. We also provide the consumer interface, so you could find a barber, book, pay, tip seamlessly on our application. We did YC in 2016. That's where I met quite a few of the people on this call. And we are based in New York, although now we're really remote. Given the pandemic, most of our employee base is remote. So look forward to chatting with you all.
That's awesome. Thanks so much for being here. So let's kick us off. One of the things I think a lot of people assume is that because your company has raised money or because you have users, that you have product market fit. And we all know that that's not necessarily true. There's lots of companies that raise a lot of money and still don't have product market fit, or maybe even have quite a few customers. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about whether or not, your company today has product market fit in your mind, and just a little bit about that journey, like sort of how you got there, if you would.
I'll start. So I think we have product market fit. Sometimes I think product market fit is it's a moving goal. It's not necessarily something you just get once and have forever. But I think we have it at this point, and our product has evolved a lot from when we first started, and it took us a long time to get to the point where I feel comfortable saying that. When we originally came up with the idea, we were solving our own problems as consumers, or people who go to barbershops. So we built our V1 was a mobile app where you could find a barber, book, pay, tip seamlessly. It worked really great, solved my problem. I didn't have to get cash, didn't have to wait in line. And that was great. But what we found pretty quickly was that on the other side, for the barbers, it was severely lacking. And we knew we didn't have that product market fit because the usage just wasn't there. It wasn't something that they needed to operate their business. So it was kind of like a nice to have. They would use it occasionally, but based on that usage, we couldn't build a real business, and we couldn't earn meaningful revenue. So we kind of went back to the drawing board, pivoted, I guess, and realized that what we needed to build was a full end-to-end system for the entire barbershop, almost like the operating system for the barbershop that handled everything, including inventory, including booking, payment. We needed a point of sale system. So it was basically an entire different product that we realized we had to build. And during that time, as we started building that, eventually when we launched it right after YC, our numbers started going up dramatically. And it was just, we could feel the difference between having something that the barbers would use occasionally when they wanted to versus something that if it went down, the owner was calling me saying, what the hell, I can't run my business. and literally we got a lot of those calls. So that was kind of when we realized we were on the right path to product market fit. And over time, we continued to iterate and improve the product to the point now where, it's best in class and just by far the best solution for our customers.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah. And one of the key things too, just to highlight, building for yourself initially, right? That you in many ways were your own sort of customer in that first version on the consumer side. And then also evolving from there as you iterated to say, well, there's a bigger picture here, which is the actual barbers and salons building their business on top of my platform, right? How can I extend this? And so you took the same product in a way and sort of refocused it on a different part of the market. And that got you to this very successful stage that you guys on this path that you're on today. Cool. Guy, you want to
Yeah, no,
tell us about your
definitely.
journey?
And would love to echo some of what Song just said. I think the mistake that a lot of people often make is that they think that, product market fit is somewhat permanent. And the reality is it's not, especially in today's economy where, everyone is, trying to copy whatever you have, right? Before you know it, you get some form of success or you get some form of traction. And next thing you know, there's 5, 10 startups out there that's trying to basically do the same thing that you're basically doing. And so I think
Are you building a clubhouse too, Guy? Are you building a clubhouse too on yours?
No, but I can guarantee.
I'm working on a clubhouse.
We just into investing, and we see like a ton of people that are coming up with clubhouses out there. The question is, do you have something that is like, fairly defensible and sustainable? And I think that's, something that often gets left behind in these conversations. And so I don't think the goal is solely to get to product market fit. I think, it's certainly an inflection point, like you presented correctly earlier, Collin, on the journey. It's something that you should aim for. But at the end of the day, you got to make sure that you're continuing to deliver something that's valuable for the customer and that's differentiated. And, absent of that differentiation, that continuous development, I just think that, you may or may not reach product market fit and then fall right back down to where you started. So that's the only thing.
Absolutely. I totally echo both what you have been saying, because our journey was about 10 or 11 years. So at sometimes, producing games, at some point creating games, you would get the product market fit. And then at some point, the players would go away. And you're like, wait a minute, do I need to reacquire these?
Farmville.
Yeah, exactly. So we were almost on this treadmill in many ways. I guess I would say to myself, don't build content, but build platforms. But either way, I think what both of you guys are saying are so true in that, it's a feeling that you guys are both, it's almost like you get momentum. There is this inflection point of, instead of it's like pushing a boulder up the hill initially is what it feels like. And you feel very busy because you're busy pushing this boulder up the hill, but you're like, I'm exerting all this energy. And at some point, you feel that change when it starts going down the hill, and like now the customers are chasing you and you can't keep up with the demand and things are getting pulled. And that's like really great in the feeling. And I think you could see it also in the numbers. You'll see, even if you look at Airbnb's like revenue numbers growth, you will definitely kind of see that. And I guess what's a YC partner without giving just a little bit of advice is
do it.
I would say early on, because you're so much smaller, if for any of these early stage founders out there, it's all about experiments early on and how quickly you move to even get to that product market fit. It's a lot like trying to start a fire, and you have all these attempts, and the more attempts you can get at it, the better. So it's like, I really like your graph and how at first I was like, oh, this is complex, but I'm like, oh yeah, that totally makes sense. That's where we were, that's where it was. So just to even get to that inflection point, there's so many attempts behind there that the best founders we see are the ones that keep on making these attempts in a certain direction, right? Like it has to keep on moving, like velocity has a direction, and you need to keep on moving towards that goal. But you're absolutely right. After you get inflection point, it just doesn't stay there. It's not, you have to keep on going. And sometimes the boulder goes down the hill and it goes up another hill as you realize, wow, this just isn't good enough anymore. We have to try something else.
Yeah, one thing that seems like a common theme too is, because the product market fit, that state is not static, that it's got to be something that you build into your organization about continually like pinging for it and continually assessing, okay, are we still on it? Do we need to add this? Do we need to change that? Because that mark is always moving. And so is the product's changing, right? The thing that was innovative today is kind of stale tomorrow. And this is kind of the point we were making in the graph about, that customer satisfaction line. You kind of approach it asymptotically. You never actually get there. There's always gonna be customers that are like, well, this button, it's too small, or, I need, there's too much latency when I book, it's 3 seconds and it should be 1. And so you're constantly having to, improve to make sure that that you keep them on the mark. So let me talk a little bit about, or ask you a little bit about, what do you wish you had known, right? Like everyone's been in this state, like I think Sybil calls it the suck, right? That state where you're in the business, you're doing everything you can, and it feels like nothing is moving, right? Every customer is harder than the one before to sign, and you almost don't know which way's up, and then when you get to the other side, you're like, oh, that was the door. It was there the whole time. And you kind of wish that someone had shared some of those nuggets with you. And I don't know if there are any that jump out to you, just ideas or thoughts there.
Yeah, I can probably go, given that I'm probably earlier stage than Song, and definitely Holly, since you've already exited. So I would say, for me as a first-time founder, I think one of the things that, one of the early advice I thought was incredibly helpful for me in my journey, and that has proven to be true, is that, the path to product market fit is actually something that you can reproduce. So it's not like, this magical thing that just happens. Like Holly just mentioned, if you are disciplined and if you're basically doing what you should be doing, at some point you're going to hit it. You can't time it. It's something that I also realized. Product market fit is something that kind of like, just hits you in the mouth. Like before you know it, your servers are being overloaded. People are contacting you from the press. Like you can't really plan or time when you're going to hit it, but you can certainly plan how you get there and make sure that you're doing the right things to get there. And so for us, like, that advice, like, came to, first and foremost, making sure that like, you're tracking demand and that you're understanding, is there a unique pattern of people or demographic that is looking for something, right? Like, is there like, that niche that you can basically grow and cultivate over time that's trying to get some kind of job done? The second one is exactly what you mentioned earlier, Con, which is track your retention. Retention is basically like, the best indicator of whether or not people are finding value in what you're building and whether or not that's going to continue to increase over time. And once you get to kind of like, a stable critical mass of basically retained users, I think then you sort of know that you're onto something, right? And then the last thing is just basically the North Star for your business. That metric will vary for any business. Each business is going to have their own North Star. For us, that's basically looking at, how much debt we're able to help people pay off or remediate. And that's something that we track on a regular. And if that's not going from like, bottom left to top right, then something is wrong, right? And so these are the three things that I would basically constantly ask yourself about your business. And if you're doing these three things, eventually you'll hit product market fit. Again, when you hit it, it's hard to know, but just stay on the path and be resilient.
Yeah, Guy, I think you made a bunch of great points there too. I'd love to just highlight the idea of a key retention metric, right? And I think Kevin Hale from YC talked about this a lot. He said, look, there's only two metrics that matter, right? Maybe if you're a social app or something along those lines, or like a game, it's like DAUs. For everyone else, it's revenue. So you tell me how many downloads you have for your app, I don't care. Like, tell me how many partners you have, I don't care. None of those things actually translate to, your key retention metric. And so understanding, in Guy's case, you're saying, hey, it's the amount of debt that we help people resolve. That's our key retention metric. What are the variables? What are the levers that are moving that number up and to the right? If it's not contributing to that, then it's a waste of time. Right. And this is where you see, I think, a lot of startups spend a lot of resources and energy optimizing for the number of partnerships or articles or times they've been in TechCrunch and all these things. And they don't really translate to this journey of finding product market fit. So I think that's a super key insight. Song, I think you were going to say something, or I might have.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say, I mean, we've learned so much. We did a lot wrong, made a ton of mistakes. But I think you said Cyber called the suck or whatever.
Yeah,
like,
the suck.
that process is like really invaluable though, of building that muscle memory early on, of getting to know your customers super well, of kind of just grinding it out, trying things that don't work, failing. I think that you kind of have to go through it. So I almost wouldn't want to go back in the past and tell myself things, because then I wouldn't have gone through that process. And I think when you build that, hopefully you kind of retain that throughout your journey with the company. or we weren't one of those companies, like you said, some founders, some companies raise a ton of money without having to go through that. And I think,
yeah.
yeah, without going through the suck. And I've seen
Yeah.
a lot of those companies, not all of them, but I've seen a lot of those companies fail eventually. Because when you have the resources and you get the resources and you haven't gone through that, you really start deploying capital just kind of like, and not knowing where to do it. And it's an easy way to get big before you're ready. And it can be dangerous. So,
Yeah.
we went through a long sucky period, but I think that hopefully it made us a better company and more resilient.
Yeah.
I actually think, oh, go on, Collin.
Oh, go ahead, please, Holly. Yeah.
Oh, I want to encourage everybody. Everybody has such great resources nowadays. Like in 2006, we just didn't have as many founder resources. Even YC wasn't even on the West Coast. So please benefit from all the lessons that are out there, all these articles, and even today. But for us, it's kind of funny. I think it's really weird, but I really wish what we would have known was to that nothing matters but your customer at the end of the day. We first started making a corporate social network, and you probably just fell asleep like hearing that. And within 8 months, we actually did 3 product iterations. And by the end of it, we only had 1,400 registered users, like 5 DAUs, which is probably our moms, and like 20 cease and desist letters. So it's super clear that there was no product market fit. The weirdest thing, I look back at that time and I felt like we were fickling with the wrong thing. We were fickling so much with product, thinking that product was the problem. And I think a lot of founders do this, like, oh, maybe I'm doing something wrong. And in some ways I am, but in other ways I didn't, I don't know if there was the problem that was there. I think sometimes I really wish I would have focused on like, or we would have focused more on like, what is the problem? And is this problem like very urgent or burning? Is it valuable? We'll see somebody pay for it other than like our moms because they're being supportive, right? So I think like I really wish like what we learned from that was, we internalized of just like we should go to where the users are. So actually our next pivot was into community apps for TV shows and sports team fans. And those people were incredibly passionate. Like people weren't passionate about work or some social network with coworkers. They were incredibly passionate. They were already on a platform where there were users, like Facebook already had the users, and it was just really, and it really felt like the other side of the mountain. Like we were just chasing, like constantly our servers were melting. So many things were happening. And at some point, while I agree with Kevin Hale that like DAUs might matter for some, and we were one of those companies that matter for some, you cannot eat or pay people off of DAUs. So you have to figure out how to convert it into revenue. You need to figure out the revenue model, like you really, really do, or else that could just hose you. So I just wish the solution wasn't just like, let's make a prettier hammer. I needed probably a screwdriver or know that was a screw on the other side, that problem I was solving.
Yeah, and Song, you kind of went through the same thing in many ways, right? I mean, when you talked about starting on the consumer side, effectively finding product market fit, but for a market that you didn't really want or that wasn't going to, pay the bills. There wasn't really a business behind that piece of it, So you certainly been through that. Guy, I think I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No. I was gonna say I really love what Holly mentioned, because I think another mistake that I see all the time with young entrepreneurs is you fall in love with the idea. And it's a little bit of a chicken and egg problem, because as an entrepreneur, you're supposed to be this crazy person that believes in this big dream that everyone's telling you it's impossible. But at the same time, it's like, dude, look at the data. Like if the data is telling you this shit's not gonna work, excuse my friend, it's not gonna work, right? And there's nothing you're gonna do that's gonna basically force users to like this thing more. And so I think that's a very good point. To your point, Holly, around like, you started off with the corporate social media, and it's like the data is just like clearly not the best way to go.
Yeah. One of the things that we talk about within our company is the analog of a car, where, the core function of a car is to get from point A to point B. And everybody had that friend in high school where they had a total junker, right? The thing, like, you had an old wire hanger for the antenna. You had to get out and open the door from the outside. The windows didn't roll up and down, but it drove, right? From point A to point B, it served that core function. And so they were willing to, overlook all the other components. And so did we. We all got in the car and went, to the movies and all those places because the core function was still there. If you contrast the other side of it, you have a really nice car. It's got rims, it's got DVD player and, seat and so on, but it doesn't drive. It sits in the driveway, right? It's just an expensive paperweight. And so to your point about the over focus on the product and the features and how pretty the font is and the colors and all those things, what you'll find is when you've got that product market fit, when you've got that function, there's always some demographic that will drive that thing, even though, it's a junker, it serves that core function and you can build from there. And so, it's key insight. Looks like we got one question here. Let me read this out. It says, for businesses where patents are involved, how much emphasis did you place on ensuring that your platform would have a patent component to obtain sort of breathing room and develop and grow your business?
So mine doesn't have patents, but Guy, you might work on patents. Well, actually, eventually we did have patents when we were larger, but for B2C, it's very hard to patent a lot of stuff. It really is. Even Amazon tried to patent the one-click shopping, but Guy, you might have
Yeah, no,
something.
for us, I think it's something that we've looked at a ton. I might have a slightly differentiated point of view as a founder. I think if you're in the software business, it's incredibly hard to defend any form of patent. And so for us, it's just kind of like, what's the point, right? Like, we're not going to win the battle with, a Google that might start to get into payments right now, or, every, I guess, platform, marketplace platform is getting into fintech these days, right? So you could envision further down the line, like it's clear that everyone is going to start looking at some of these differentiated technologies and try to basically innovate on that front. And I think I look around and what I see is, look, like these things are just gonna slow us down. It's not gonna help us with people that have like, massive legal budgets. And especially in software, you can always tweak something.
Yep.
And so for us, it's just, unfortunately something that doesn't necessarily apply. I do think there are certain sectors where it does apply, and unfortunately, I don't necessarily have, domain expertise in
I would, yeah, that's what I would say, Colin. From like the companies I see in YC, I do think that deep tech having a patent is incredibly helpful. I agree with you, Guy, on like a lot of software stuff is just so hard. Even funny enough, hardware gets a little bit difficult to patent as well, because you could just do a knockoff of it and just change one slight thing and it just goes all the way out there. But there is some type of like deep tech that you can end up patenting around. But if you're just starting out, I think it's really all about like customers, and making something that they want.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to echo that too. I mean, we went through this process in my first company. We had a number of patents, and I learned the hard way, where we had a partnership with Major League Baseball Advanced Media, and they, ripped off. Our company was called FanGo. We had a partnership with them. They created a product called FanDirect, where they had literally ripped off just screen for screen. And I remember calling the president and saying like, WTF, we're going to sue you, blah, blah, blah. I think I was 23 at the time. And the guy said point blank, we did $420 million last year. He was like, good luck. You might win, but by the time you do, you'll be dead anyway. So, my advice to you is just to move on. And he was totally right. Just responding, literally writing a letter to them saying that we were unhappy about them potentially infringing on our patent, that cost $10,000. That was 10 grand. And so when you put it in perspective, enforcing these patents is like, you're talking $2.5 million to enforce it. And then a lot of times there's nothing to get at the end of the day, right? The company that's stealing from you or whatever, they may not even be around by the time you go to file action. So, to Holly's point, a lot of this comes down to one, speed, right? Like how fast can you go? Can you beat them because they're bigger and sort of slower? And then two, what's your unique insight that's not really going to be patentable, right? Just that it's just from that suck. It's from being in that time of understanding the customer and having to spend that time around them, interviewing and so on. So just thought there. Let's see here. We got a second question here. Double clicking on pivots. When do you decide you need to pivot? What do you wish you'd known if you were starting over from the beginning? Would you have done anything differently as far as pivots are concerned?
Oh, I'm happy to take this one because we went through like several different pivots, like because we started as corporate social network, then build like the largest fan communities for TV shows and sports teams on Facebook, and then built a mobile gaming company that has like Marvel and all this Hollywood IP games to it. So I look back and I think like I keep on thinking that there were like basically three things that we would look at on the pivot. So first, on like knowing when and how to pivot. I already shared the story that it was pretty clear we didn't have product market fit on the corporate social network. And we looked at ourselves, we said, there were three things we looked at. We're like, is there a market? There possibly could have been a market for us. Like people were doing cold calling, and we realized really quickly that the market was going to be what we call a B2B market. And we looked at our team, our whole team had come from a consumer company. So we're like, this might not be our core capabilities. And then the third thing that we looked at was like, and we aren't even passionate. Like we were like zonked where we're like, hey, I'm solving my own problem. Like we didn't really have the problem. The problem that we did have, which is funny enough, a very tiny problem, but something that a common behavior is we would run home every Monday night, watch this very old TV show called 24, come back the next day and chat about it the whole time. So we're like, oh, this is interesting. Like we can we're very passionate about this. On top of that, there just wasn't places for fans to connect, particularly on Facebook. And already there was so much information that was captured, and that just grew like wildfire from the first week on. Like it was really literally like such a different experience. And like we grew that to over 30 million users. And you would think like, oh, this is great, right? Like product market fit, it keeps going and going. No, our retention was sucky. We had ads, like it was an ad supported type kind of company. And then in 2008, the worst thing happened, this thing called a recession. I know it may not feel that way right now that are we in a recession or not? And what was so crazy is our Series B term sheets were signed and the money was supposed to get wired into our bank account. And the day that the money was supposed to be wired was the same day that Lehman Brothers, Bear Stearns, they all dropped to $1. The VC, which was an institutional VC, like still operating, they didn't talk to us at all for like a whole week. We're calling them. We're like, dude, we need the money, because basically we saw our CPMs just drop to pennies. Our $3 million contract gone. Like everybody was in panic mode. They're like, I'm so sorry. And ad revenue is the first to hit. And so basically what we ended up doing was, we called them, and finally, after a week, they responded to us, the VCs, and they're like, we're very, very sorry. We are scared. We cannot deploy any capital. And I think if you were fundraising in March, you probably would have felt that this year. There are some businesses like 95% of the revenue gone within a week. Like everything just shut down like so quickly. Yeah. Oh, Collin.
Yeah, we went through that.
There is light at the end of the tunnel. I'm here to say that.
We went through that.
I mean, well, like that. Yeah, exactly. And it was like you kind of have this come to Jesus moment of like, okay, what do we do? And so we again looked at those three things. We're like, well, it's pretty clear there's no market for us on building fan communities anymore. And we had to go back to building again, go back to the bottom. But you know what was killing it with these games on Facebook called like Zynga and all these other ones. And we're like, wait a minute, we have like collectively like almost 100 years worth of experience on Facebook. They didn't have any games experience. We don't either. We love games. Why don't we do something that was kind of missing in the market? It wasn't casual games that we ended up doing. We ended up doing what we call mid-core type games. And so then we had to rebuild. We had to kill a lot of our babies and we had to rebuild. And we launched on Facebook with that game. But those are probably, I think it's pretty clear when it's just a cliff. Like it's almost like you keep on pushing that boulder up a hill. And after a while, you're like, wait a minute, this doesn't seem right. And I think after a while is maybe a couple months. You shouldn't like keep on flipping around. I think it's very dependent on what you're building and how long it should take. Like if you're sitting there building like a B2C company 18 months in and you still don't have like $1 of revenue, I'd be like, ooh, that's a little bit, not a lot of progress in a short amount of time. That's what YC's always, and any investor is looking for, a ton of progress in a short amount of time, as well as like, did you find something that people want, right? Like that's eventually should lead to that. So that's kind of the things we kind of looked at on like, how do we know what to pivot? And then what is it that we can pivot into? Which was, what are things that people want? Big markets, which is incredibly important as a founder. Like, what is your core competency? What are things you're good at? And like, I would even throw in passion. I know some people underrate passion, but it's 11 years. You got to be passionate about something. Maybe the people that you work with that can also take you through it.
Absolutely. Song, I feel like you had a similar situation when the pandemic hit, where I don't know if you guys had to kind of reinvent parts of your business or the whole thing. Yeah, I'd love for you to talk about that process for you.
Yeah, we got really lucky. Well, first, to Holly's point, this is just a word of advice when fundraising. The deal is not over until the money is wired and in your bank account. Just wiring alone isn't enough because they can put a stop on it. They can contact their bank. It needs to be accepted in your bank account. Then the deal is done. Until then, consider that deal not done. Term sheets really don't mean that much. They mean something, but when things get tough, VCs will pull term sheets. They will walk on term sheets. So just remember that. Yeah. So we got lucky this time because we closed on our Series B. It had 2 closes. The first close was December 2019, which was most of the money, and then the second close ended up being in March, but it was like March 9th or something. It was like right before everything went to hell. So we got pretty lucky. So we had the money fully in our bank account when everything shut down, which gave us the ability to really focus on like how we're gonna help our customers. So the entire company's attention and resources went to what are the things we can do, what features can we launch, can we waive subscription, which we did for all our customers during this time. And I think that so from March till probably like May, June, our revenue also went down because our customers were closed, probably like yours. But then we saw as they started reopening, a lot of those decisions that we made and the features we launched ended up giving us a lot of tailwinds, and we started seeing expedited growth more so than pre-pandemic, which was interesting. So yes, you never know. A lot of companies did well during this phase last year, and many got hit pretty hard. So you kind of never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, it's an interesting experience too, because it's sort of the harder the things become, or the harder the problem becomes, the more obvious the easy routes become as well, right? So in many ways, the seeds that you had planted in the product before COVID hit, before the pandemic, those things were a little uncertain. Okay, do people adopt the digital? Are they going to pay remotely? Are they going to be able to book ahead of time? Is that going to be a big business for us? It's like it's not clear. Then the minute the pandemic hits, all of a sudden it's like, no, the future's now. And all of these things were, solid bets. And it was similar for us in restaurants that, you tell someone, oh, I sell software to restaurants, and they say, oh, sorry to hear that. And you're like, well, no, because now they're all trying to figure out, how do they do, what we've been promising, for the last couple of years. How do they do this now? Because the thing that we were saying was coming 5 years from now is actually, today. And so it changed a lot of things and created a lot of opportunity. One other just quick thought, I think, about pivoting, something again Cybele had said to me once, that pivoting is not hopping. And hopping is like changing, both your product and your market at the same time. Like when you pivot, you literally are holding one thing constant and changing the other. And so at any given time, you really want to focus on, am I changing my product right now, or am I changing my market right now? I'm selling a different product to the same set of customers, or I'm selling, I'm selling a different product to different, or sorry, I'm selling the same product, but to a different set of customers. I think that's a sort of a key piece of this. Let's see, there's another question here. building the team around finding product market fit, right? So if you're the idea person or if you're the technology person, what are the other positions that you need to fill to build an organization that has higher likelihood of finding product market fit?
My theory on this is that earlier in the company's life cycle, you should really optimize for intelligence, grit, and ability to learn, as opposed to like expertise, like experts, market or domain experts. The domain experts, I think, come when you're like at the scaling phase, but when you're early, so much is going to change, so much is dynamic. If you bring on somebody that's an expert in a given area, like that may or may not actually be important for your business 6 months later, 12 months later. So it's more important to find people that are flexible or that are gritty, that can hop in and kind of be generalists, and that are just like really intelligent and can help you execute. That's my thought on it.
I think it depends.
Great point.
I in addition to that, I also think it depends on what kind of business you're building, but it does end up breaking down into, you have someone who's selling and someone who's building. And together, if you optimize around speed, like working as a unit, you can get to product market fit faster, because the builder actually can help with actually running experiments, right? And then the seller can actually go and talk to customers, right? Because you're making something that people want. So it's a problem and a solution. So you have one type, the person building solution, the person like going to talk to the customers, and you could do it together. And it's totally fine. It's just and maybe it's in one person, but oftentimes it's 2 or 3 people. But it does kind of depend. I mean, my only caveat on expertise is I see it often with like biotech companies. They might need like a medical advisor or somebody who did the research. I also see it on things that are heavily BD heavy, but just try to get those people as investors, and they can open up their network. You don't necessarily quote unquote need them quite on your team, I don't think, unless they're really great at pounding the pavement and closing one after the other at the stage that you need, that you can even intake those types of customers.
I think I agree with everything that Song and Holly just mentioned. The one thing the one caveat I guess I would mention is, at least for me, I value experience a ton. And while domain expertise, to your point, Song, is not necessarily something that I think is critical, I do think earned perspective is pretty instrumental. And that can materialize itself in 2 ways. I think in one way, it could be that partner or co-founder that you're looking for is someone that has worked on that particular problem before, and that has like some form of unique insight that is not obvious to the market, because that will just accelerate your your development process, your ideation process, your innovation, and everything in between. So I think that's incredibly critical. And if you can't find that, the other thing I would say is earn perspective, at least broadly speaking, in startup. You would not understand how much speed you gain from having someone that has been around early stage startups before. Because if everyone is first time founders, unless you surround yourself with great mentors like the YC network, you're just gonna basically chase your tail for the first few months.
For years.
There's a lot that comes from someone that has done it before, that has seen it before, even if they failed. And so that would be the only nugget that I would add there.
Yeah, that's great. Sorry, we got one last question here. Oh, looks we're going to wrap up. I think we're out of time here. Well, look, I want to thank everybody. I know things are really busy for everyone right now. Getting back to hopefully what's going to become the new normal here. So yeah, Mandy, do you want to take it away? Thanks so much, everyone.